beginning.
Hey everyone, what's up? This is Taicho here again from Team Haam, and this time I'm here to present y'all one of my favorite decks to play in Premium, one of my all-time favorite personal decks, Vanquisher Narukami. So, I've been wanting to do this deck list for a while for you guys. I've been playtesting the hell out of this with my teammates. Like, I've been playing against Bermuda Triangle, Riviera, I've played against Chaos Breaker, I've played against Golds, Grand Blue, you name it. I've thrown this deck at the wall. I've thrown this deck at all my teammates, trying to see the best way I can do it. And I think this is a ratio that I personally like, and so I wanted to get that out there for everyone. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So remove that. All right. So we'll start off with the grade 3s. Obviously, the Big Daddy himself, 3 Dragonic Vanquishers. You need this man. You need to get this man as your grade 3 ride. He's the main grade 3 that you need for the deck to go. It's all about him. His abilities are, during your turn, if 3 or more cards on any players are bound, he gives the front row plus 10. That comes especially important when we come into later, when we start striding into this bad boy Stunverse. We'll get into that later. But his second skill is very nice to have. You counterblast 1. Choose any player's front row rear guards, bind it. Just keep in mind that is mandatory. So if you have one and your opponent doesn't, you have to bind one of yours. So keep that in mind. And then if your soul has a grade 3, both you and your opponent have to bind one from hand. So he's a very solid boss that you need. And of course he gives the Excel marker, which is definitely extra what we need. So I've seen that playing with 3 of him has been working for me. When I do 4, it's been a little cloggy, so I recommend just doing 3. Same with the other Dragonic Vanquisher boss we need, which is Dragonic Vanquisher Full Bronto. So he's treated as Vanquisher on Vanguard Circle. When he's placed on the Vanguard Circle, he gives the front row currently there plus 10. And then the big skill, the main skill of his, is when he's bound from your hand during your turn, if your Vanguard is Dragonic Vanquisher, so either him or, you know, the guy we just talked about, you can discard a card from hand, call him out from the bind, ride him to Vanguard Circle from the bind zone, gets you your additional marker to let you draw an extra card for the Excel 2, and then he comes in at standing and he gets drive -1, so you can swing with him and do an extra drive check. And at the end of the turn, you choose a grade 3 from your soul after you do that skill, and you ride it as rest. So you'll go back at the end of turn into this Dragonic Vanquisher. Very solid card as well. One of the key components of this deck. Love this guy, man. The moment I see this guy in my hand, I'm thinking, okay, I'm about to swing at my opponent twice with the Vanguard. It's always a strong feeling. The only sucky part is when you have to ride this guy, but from my playtesting, it doesn't happen very much, especially with the other units I've chosen to run with this deck. And I've seen lists run 4 of this guy, just the same reason as this guy. When I run him as a 4 of, it's always been cloggy. I always have 1 too many in my hand, and I've just been working with 3. It's been very solid for me. If you want to run 4 and it works for you, do it, by all means. And then, of course, we round up the 3s with this guy. One of the MVPs of this deck, one of the main combo pieces in this deck. If you're looking for any other Dragonic Vanquisher list, you're going to be seeing this as well. 4 Jaggy Shot Dragoons. This guy is your combo extender. He allows you to do your Dragonic Vanquisher stuff. I mean, overall, you need this guy as a 4 of. I cannot see you running less than 4. So what he does is when he attacks a Vanguard, you bind a card from your hand. So, you know, hint, hint, go into this guy. And if you do, you choose one of your opponent's front or rear guards, bind it. And then, if your opponent has no front or rear guards, you get to draw a card. So, you bind this guy, you draw a card, and then you trigger his skill. Why wouldn't you want to do that, right? That sounds pretty strong. It really is. Then the second ability is at the end of the battle he attacked, if your Vanguard's Dragonic Vanquisher, so either the original 3 we talked about or this guy, he can go into Soul and you draw an additional card. So remember earlier I was saying you needed a 3 in the Soul? Well, that's the combo right there. After you do him, goes the Soul, so next turn you can do his skill for sure and bind a card from either player's hand, or from both players' hands, sorry. Which is a solid card. If you're going to build this deck in Premium, do get 4 of these, no less. But that's enough of the 3s. So, let's go into our 2s. I run 4 Rock Climb Dragoons. Hopefully the glare's not too bad, guys. I think this is just like Jackie Shot, very essential for the deck. I run him as a 4-of. I've tried to cut him down to 3 or 2, and when I don't see it, I just feel bad. It's just a feel bad game. So definitely run this guy as a 4-of if you can, if you have them. They're very affordable, very cheap, base rarity, very much needed. His ability is at the end of the battle he attacked. If your Vanguards are going to Vanquisher, which it will most likely be, you retire him to draw a card. Then you can bind one from your hand to bind an opponent's front row. So you can pay the cost, even if they don't have a front row unit, to just bind that card from hand, which is extremely important for, you can guess it, we talked about him earlier, this guy right here for full Bronto. Or for other cards that we have in this deck that you can bind for as well. Very strong card, very much needed as a 4-of. You can try to run it as less, but again, from my testing, just must be a 4. Speaking of units to bind from hand, this is one of the other targets you can bind from hand. Demonic Dragon Berserker Chatura. So his ability is on rear. When his attack hits a Vanguard, you can Soul Blast 1, draw 1 card, and then choose one of your opponent's front rear guards and bind it. So you can bind this from your hand for one of your bind from hand skills that we were looking at earlier. And you would want to bind him for the reason of his second skill. When he's bound from hand during your turn, you can call him to rear. If you do, he gets plus 10k for the turn. So he becomes an 18k beater. On an Excel marker, he gets plus 5 if you do an Excel 2. So he's 23, potentially 28, potentially higher because of the power-ups from the Vanquisher effects. I mean, this is definitely a guy that you'd want to see in your hand when you have a bunch of bind from hand effects. I've actually tried playing this deck with just 1 less at 3, and when I didn't see him and I had a bunch of bind from hand cards in my hands, it just didn't feel good. So to make sure that I see this guy as soon as I can, make sure he's in my hand for those bind effects, I run him as a 4-of. Also, fun fact, on your grade 2 turn, you can ride your grade 2, call him to rear, and swing at your opponent early, especially if you go first, because they'll most likely be at an 8 or 7k grade 1. You can rush with this guy and force your opponent to decide, do you want the counterblast, but let me draw? Or do you want to drop hand so I don't draw, but you lose 1 extra card from your hand? Like, what's the trade-off here? What do you want to do? So definitely run it as a 4-of. You can get away with 3, but again, if you don't see it, it is kind of a feel-bad moment as well. And then to round out the 2s, for some people, this might be a little controversial. I know for some of my teammates, they've suggested maybe to exchange him out for something else. I can't do it. I love Joe in this deck. His abilities are Vanguard Rearguard when placed, you counterblast 1, you choose a column, you bind the front row, and then if there's a back row, you can move it up. So he goes around resist units, because resist units specifically state they cannot be targeted for your opponent's abilities. Well, he's not targeting them directly. He is choosing the column. So he's going around that resist unit. And so you can bind that resist unit in the front row and then move a back row up, right? So you can bind that back row unit with one of the other units we spoke about earlier. So for that effect alone, great. But the main use for him is his once per turn on rear guard. At the end of the battle, your Vanguard attack. If your opponent's front row has no rear guards, you can counterblast 1 and restand him. So that restand is really important, especially when you're doing all these power-ups with Dragonic Vanquisher and full Bronto later on. He can be on the rearguard circle. He swings. You do your Vanquisher plays, your full Bronto play. Most likely your opponent's not going to have a front row once you do all that, especially after the strike we talk about later. You can then restand him with all those power-ups and swing 1 more time just to get 1 extra or 2 extra guarding cards from hand, deal that extra damage. For some situations, he's actually my kill shot. There have been times where my opponent's hand would be so low after guarding and everything that I'm doing that they can't block him. He's that last attack I need. So he's been great for me as a solid 2-of. 3, I've tried it. Again, it was okay, but definitely at least as a 2-of. I totally vouch for this guy. I know that new grade 2 Spark Rain Eradicator Spark Rain Dragon came out in collection, but I tried that card out. I tested that card out. It didn't work for me. There weren't really many situations that came up that was really useful. But this guy, though, always useful when I saw him. Always. So definitely, if you can get your hands on a couple, should be pretty affordable in his base rarity. Do it. So that rounds out the 2s. We go to our ones. This is our main grade 1 ride target. Chain Bolt Dragoon. So he says, when placed on Vanguard, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 Vanquisher card. So full Bronto or Vanquisher, the original. Reveal it, add it to your hand, shuffle your deck. He is the main grade 1 you want to ride. There is other cards that we could ride instead, but he's a free search. If you get that Vanquisher, it's an extra +1 to hand. You don't have to discard for it. You don't have to pay a cost for it. You just do it. Also, he also benefits as well as a bind target because he says when he's bound from hand during your turn, so for like Rockline Dragoon or for Jaggy Shot we spoke about, you can bind this guy and then he gets to be called to Rearguard Circle when you do that. So solid card. I don't see why you would not want to run a 4 of. If you don't see it, it doesn't hurt that bad, but definitely if you don't see it as your first ride, it does hurt the momentum. It really does. Now, for my other grade 2s, I'm running Mighty Bolt Dragoon, but as you can tell, there are 2 different arts. That's because one's the V era, one's the G era. So I run 2 of the V era, 2 of the G era. Reason being, this guy searches for any 3. So when I call him, I check top 5 for a grade 3, add it to hand. Then if I add 1, I have to discard 1. He can add Jaggy Shot to my hand if I see him. He also gets +5 if I bind any player's cards during my turn, which is going to happen. It's Narukami. Always happens. If it's not happening, something's wrong. So he's there just to search for the Jaggy Shot for the most part. This guy is here to search for the grade 3 specific Vanquisher we need, because his ability is when he's placed on rear, you can reveal any grade 3 in your hand. So say you have an extra Jaggy Shot or you have a full Bronto that you really don't want to ride. You can reveal it, search your deck for the Vanquisher that you want. So specifically, our grade 3 bad boy right here, OG Vanquisher. Well, V-Era OG Vanquisher, I should say. Search for him, add it to hand, and then you discard a card from hand. So you now have your proper grade 3 ride for your first grade 3 turn. And then also he is a stride fodder because the old G-Era stride fodders, the old G-Era grade 1s like these, that search for a specific 3 were treated as stride fodder. So you can discard them, they get a grade +2. So when you're striding, he becomes a grade 3. Very solid. I think you need to be running at least 2 of these so you can guarantee that search for Vanquisher. I have gotten, recommendations from other Narukami players that, maybe he's not needed. You can get away with this technically. And yes, that is true. If you don't want to invest in a couple of these, you can get away with 4 of these. That's not anything wrong with it. But to have that option, as a man who likes options myself, having the option to say, I need my grade 3 Vanquisher, the specific one. I see this. I have a grade 3 in hand. I can get him. I like that. Versus, I have this. I hope he's there in top 5. So I run 2 and 2. It's been working for me in playtesting. If you want to build Vanquisher, I recommend 2-2. And then for other grade 1s, so this guy, we were talking about Spark Rain Dragon earlier. This guy came out with him in the same V collection that just got released. This is Eradicator Demolition Dragon. So he is a Vanguard Rearguard that says at the end of the battle that he attacked or the attack he boosted, if the attack hits, you draw a card. Then you can choose up to 1 card in your opponent's drop zone and bind it. If you bound a card with him and he's on Rearguard Circle, he goes into Soul. So this guy, I want to run this as a 4 of. I'm trying to figure out space for it. It's really hard, but if you can find the space, like maybe if you want, maybe cut down 1 chain Mighty Bolt if you want. That's a really risky play, but hey, if you like it, go for it. But definitely this guy, originally, I didn't think I was gonna like him that much because when I first read him, I misread the card. Yes, reading is hard sometimes, but I misread him thinking that when he hit, you had to bind a card and he would go to Soul. So when I read that you can choose up to 1, that means you don't have to choose anything. He was always gonna stay there as a booster or an attacker with the on hit to draw. That's amazing, especially if you can see this turn 1. If you go second, you're attacking first. You call him to booster, or you can call him to rear and force that on-hit attack, forcing your opponent to drop more cards to guard than they normally wouldn't want to. So, honestly, Great card, great addition to this deck. This is all you really need from V Collection to update this deck, besides the Heal Guardians that we'll get into in a bit. It's a very good card. There's nothing else I can really say. It's just definitely run it if you have the space. If you have your hands on these, do it. I highly recommend it. Now to round out the grade 1s, this is another card that I've seen some people in the Narukami community say, should you not? I do. I run 2 Anastasias. She's a Sentinel from the G era. So she says, besides her Perfect Guard ability, her other skill is when Thunderstrike 4, so if your opponent has 4 cards bound at least, when this card is retired from the Guardian Circle, so after you guard with it, right, and the battle is done, you may draw a card. So definitely for a stride we're going to talk about a little bit later. The moment you guard with this, you discard, you block the attack, then she goes away, and you draw a card to refill what you discarded. It's a very solid card. She's actually helped me out in so many situations. Most of the time when I guard with her, the card that I would draw would usually be a trigger or a defensive card, like some kind of shield value. Multiple times I've had too many 3s in my hand. They'd be clumped up. They'd be not enough shield value in hand. Do her, discard the 3, discard the card I can't really guard with or don't want to guard with, draw something else. Usually what I drew is a defensive card. Very solid, very good card. So the reason why some people don't like it is because there are guard restrictions in Premium that say no grade 1s or higher, no Sentinels, stuff like that. And yes, that is a very warranted complaint about it, to why not to run it. But that's really not a lot of clans that do that, in my experience. Maybe like Gold Paladins can do it because of the Gurgwood Stride. There's also, like if you run it, the Shaharat Stride that says no grade 1s or greater. There are guard restricts like that, but for the most part, I haven't really run into those type of guard restricts. She's been a solid card. I love her as a 2 of. Definitely, if you have the space to run it, or you want to run grade 1 Sentinels for Narukami, Vanquisher specifically, I recommend her for sure. Alright, so for the triggers, we run 4 Heal Guardians. Reason being, we need to get to grade 3, guys. If we don't get to grade 3, our deck doesn't really do much. It has some early plays, some early aggression, but for the most part, it is a grade 3 focused deck. It is focused in the sense of you need your Vanquisher. You need that grade 3 to go off. So before we get there, we're probably going to get rushed out. I know that sounds counterintuitive for Narukami. You'd be thinking, well, wait, why would I want to rush Narukami when they're just going to bind my stuff? Well, we have to get to grade 3 and stride to do that. So we were always susceptible to rush. Always have, always will be. Anyone who argues otherwise, they really haven't faced against Narukami yet, that much then. We like to be the aggressors. We don't like to be aggressed on, if that makes sense. Sorry guys, my English is bad, I'm sorry. Don't unsubscribe, please. So definitely, we need the Heal Guardians to make it there to grade 3. Give 10k to your Vanguard, or -2 crit on the attacker. The second ability, which is when placed on rearguard from hand, if your damage on has no cards, you put the top card as damage. Not once have I had to do that. I mean, Vanquisher doesn't really use a lot of counterblast. I don't know if you were, if you guys were noticing when I was saying all the effects, there wasn't really a lot of counterblasting going on. So you don't really care if you get damage denied too much. So we don't really care for the second skill. It's mainly just the survivability of +10 or -2 crit. That's what we use these for. Once we get there, these are just G Guardian fodder. Definitely run 4 Heal Guardians. I've tried running the 20k shield heals. It's just, it's not worth it. You got to get to 3, guys. I'm telling you, the race to 3, the race to 3. Then we follow up with our crits. We're running the 4 stride fodder crits because we need to stride into our main stride, which I'll get into in a bit. I run 3 of the crits that go into soul, +10 and draw. Just fills up soul, gives you draw. Now, I do run 2 front triggers from Overdress, the 20k shields. There have been some situations where I will have a field, I'll swing with the van, and then I say, oh, I hit the front trigger. Now everybody in the front row gets the 10 on top of what Vanquisher and the full Bronze and all of them are doing. So it just gives extra power to the field if you see it on drive check. But for the most part, we had 2 extra trigger slots, and I thought, you know what, 20k shield, I like that. I don't think I need that many crits. I'd rather take the defensive options. So the 2, and then because we were running 2 Sentinel grade 1s, these are the other 2 Sentinels, the draw PGs, just solid Sentinels. If you didn't want to run Anastasias, you just run this as a 4-of. I know that for some people, they'll say, nah, the 4 draw PGs are better because of not only the guard restricted shoes, but also because just the draw. Vanquisher is a combo piece reliant deck. You need a certain pieces to work together to finish off the opponent. Well, that's why some people say you need the front and the 4 draw PGs. I say you can get away with the 2 draw PGs because Anastasia will save you later on when you're guarding to draw that extra defensive cards mid-battle. So, but we still need the draws in some way, shape, or form. So the 2 draw PGs have been enough in my playtesting with everybody here locally. And then our overtrigger, we're in the Dragon Empire overtrigger because Unga Bunga's Restand Vanguard is great. And for our starter, Vieira starter, Spark Kid Dragoon, best starter, cutest starter, Narukami, don't at me. All right, so that's that. And then for the strides. So this is the main stride you'll be going into. He is the big boss. He is what makes the deck super strong and consistent. This is Conquering Supreme Dragon, Stunverse Dragon. He says, Axe, Soul Blast 1, flip any G unit. He goes back to the G zone. Your opponent picks 4 cards from their rearguard circles and then 4 cards from their drop zone, binds everything, and then for every 4 cards total, like for every 4 cards in your bind zone total, not just from his skill, but just in general, your opponent binds 1 from hand, you draw 1 from hand. First stride, most people will probably lose 1 card. My testing, most people just lose 1. You don't get the full effect. If you get the full effect, then you're playing somebody who either doesn't know what Narukami does, or they just decide to commit. I mean, that's the only 2 reasons I would see it. The second time you do it, that's when it's devastating, because that's usually 3 cards out of their hand and you're drawing 3 cards. This guy is so strong, so essential for the deck. He is what makes the deck really, really good. A top contender in Premium. If you don't have this guy in your deck, you're not going to be seeing as good results as if you did have him in your deck. So I don't run him more than a 3-of, because every time I would go into 3, if I went into the 4th one, I would deck out. Every time. So you only need to do it max 3 times. If you make it to the 3rd one, your opponent is most likely going to lose that match. Most likely. The 2nd one already is usually enough, but that 3rd one is there to clinch it. So that's 3 of the strides. Other options we have is Dragonic Vanquisher V-Buster. He says Soul Blast 1, flip a copy, bind 1 card from your opponent's field, drop zone. And then if you have more rear guards than your opponent, 3 of your units get +3. That's okay. His other ability is Thunderstrike 7. So if your opponent has 7 cards bound, your front row gets +5, and he gets +1 drive, +1 crit. That's usually not going to happen. You'll never ever stride into this unless your opponent is outplaying your Stunverse and they're saying, I'm not going to commit a board, I'm not going to really drop a lot of hand. So okay, well, I at least have an option to stride into. If you don't want to stride that turn because you feel the Stunverse isn't going to do it, you could just do your Vieira plays. But nah, I like having this as not only the flip target for Stunverse, but as a first stride if the event Stunverse doesn't really do much that first stride. Now for late game options, I have Dragonic Vanquisher Voltage. He says once per turn, you flip a copy. He gains the ability that when he hits a Vanguard, your opponent chooses one of their rear guards, retire it. Then you get to choose 2 cards from their drop zone, bind it. But the main skill we go for is his GB3 skill, which is during your turn, all your units in your front row get 3k for each card in your opponent's bind zone. So after you do this, and after you do your other binding shenanigans, if you stride into this, your front row is going to get really scary. That's what he's there for, especially if they're at 5 damage. He is there to try to end it with that power up. Then we also have as an option VMAX. If you're at Thunderstrike 5, so if your opponent has 5 cards bound, at the end of the battle that he attacked a Vanguard, you can counterblast 2. If your opponent has no rear guards, your opponent takes the damage regardless what damage they're at. All right, so we do that. We do that 1 damage to our opponent. So even if they're at 5 damage, after he attacks, if they have no rear guards, you can counterblast to deal a damage. I only used him 1 time, but I have him there again as an option. He is there just in case, you know, maybe I can get away with this win if I know that my opponent's out of heals, if I've been keeping track of their resources, what they have, what they've been drive checking. I'm going to him. His other skill is when he attacks the Vanguard, I can choose one of my opponent's rear guards for each face-up Dragonic or for each Vanquisher G unit face-up. So if I flipped over the other Vanquisher strides that we've looked at, he can attack 1 additional rear guard on top of the Vanguard circle for those strides face-up in the G zone. Again, just an option to have. You'll hardly ever go into this, but if the situation arises, he is there. Then we run the GB8, Conquering Supreme Dragon, Closer Dragon. His ability is when he's placed on Van, retire all rear guards of all fighters, not just opponents, but opponents and yours. Then bind all cards in your opponent's drop zone, face up, and at the end of turn he gets, all of your units get 2k for each card in all fighters' bind zones. So he's a GB8, so he only works once you have 7 face-up G units, then you stride into him, that's 8. The reason why we keep him is late game, if they survived the 2 stun versus, you've done your G guards, they have a huge amount of cards in the drop zone, you go, okay, we're going to try to end it right now. We're going to go to this, we're going to bind everything, and for each card bound, all my units, not only just the front row, but the back rows as well, everyone's going to get 2k. We're going to go in there with huge amount of power, try to end this game right here and now. Hence his name, Closer Dragon. Very good card. Definitely run it as a 1-of. There have been games where I won off of this card because of the power-up. So, definitely worth the 1-of spot. Then we run the 1 Progenitor Dragon, the Gilgal. So while he's face up in the G zone, when you pay the cost of stride, you don't have to discard. You just stride for free. Just remember, if you run him, you cannot flip him for another stride's ability. You have to stride into this. The cost to stride into him is to discard a copy of your Vanguard. So another reason why you'd want to search for your Dragonic Vanquisher, especially if you're planning to go into this. His axe skill is you can counterblast 2, soul blast 1. He gets 10k power. He can attack all your opponent's units. And for each unit he hits, you countercharge 1. So he refunds his counter blast cost. So if your opponent has 2-3 units and you get to stride first, he is usually the first stride I go into. I've done many games where I've strode into him first and then into stun verse, because he still wipes the board. So he still makes the opponent commit another field once you get rid of it the first time with him. Definitely recommend it if you can get your hands on him. He is a little pricey on his base rarity. I don't remember exactly the price, but I want to say it's in the $15-$20 range. He's not necessary, but he is nice to have, especially if you go first. If you're able to stride first, I should say. You can go into him, whiteboard, set up for your stun verse next turn, because your opponent's going to try to commit the next turn to try to kill you. And then for the G guards, 2 Bull Rocks, Thunderstrike 3. So if your opponent has 3 cards bound, he gets 10k shield, so an easy 25k shield. His other skill at the end of the battle, that this unit was placed on the Guardian Circle. For every 4 cards your opponent has bound, you can retire one of their front row rested rear guards. Specifically, that will come into play if you guard against Aqua Force players, for example. They're doing Tidal Assault, a grade 2 Tidal Assault. They swing with the Tidal Assault. You can guard with this, and you can retire it before they restand it because of the way this card works in the Guardian Circle during the battle step. So you can retire pesky units like that, get them off the board before any standing happens for them. Solid card, also a 25k shield again, very solid. Run it as a 2-of for sure. Now, the main G guard for Narukami is I run 2-of is MP Dragon. The reason why I only run him as a 2-of, some people run it as a 3. I only run it as a 2-of. In order to go into him, you have to have one GB unit already face up to go into him, and you have to flip a G Guardian to do his ability. So it's a pretty big cost for it, because flipping G Guardians it sucks for defensive purposes. In exchange though, when he's played, if your opponent retires and binds one of their rear guards, their choice, and then after they retire and bind one, if they have 2 or more rear guards than you do, they have to regular retire another one. So he potentially removes 2 rear guards. Unfortunately, your opponent gets to choose what they are, but being able to say get rid of 2 rear guards at the cost of flip 1 G Guardian, it's not a bad trade-off. Definitely interrupts a lot of plays, especially if people aren't accounting for this. All my teammates now, when I play against them, they always account for this card after learning its existence. So definitely run as a 2-of. It interrupts plays. You'd be surprised how much it hurts just retiring 2 of your opponent's rear guards on their turn while they're attacking you. So definitely get 2 of these. If not 2, you want to run 3, go for it. Just remember, for G Guardians, once you have 4 face-up cards in the 4 face-up G Guardians in the G zone, you can no longer call G Guardians from the G zone. So do keep in mind if you want to run 3 of these. We run the 1 Mystic Wisdom Creation Brahma. Its ability is when placed on the Guardian Circle, I choose 2 different grades from my drop, bind them, and gets plus 10k shield. So it's a free 25k shield. The bind 2 matters when you go into the GB8 because the GB8 specifies all your units get 2k extra for every card in every fighter's bind zone. So not just your opponents, yours as well. So they play off each other a little bit. Just a little cool interaction there. And the last G Guardian that we have is the Air Elemental Rock Tome. It's the Cray Elemental G Guard that says when placed in Guardian Circle, discard 1, draw 1. As I was saying earlier, because there's 10 3s in this deck, great normal unit grade 3s, not including the Heal Guardians, you have a lot of grade 3s clogging up your hand, and sometimes you just want to discard 1 to be able to draw an additional card, potentially a shield unit. So if you don't have Anastasia, the grade 1, you can just G-Guard into this, discard that grade 3, potentially draw into a defensive card that might save you that turn. Happened multiple times in my playtesting. So it's been warranted as a 1-up for sure. But that's Narukami Premium in a nutshell. Dragonic Vanquisher. Love this clan, love this deck. It does have some bad matchups, like Grand Blue. For example, it also doesn't do as well against players that know how to control how many units they call out against you. They're able to control their field, and that they call their field, they do their thing, and then all their units run away, avoiding this guy. That hurts as well. But for the most part, it's always a threat. It's always going to put in that pressure, and it's just going to get the job done. So I hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. If you haven't liked, subscribed to this channel, please do. We're definitely planning on doing more premium fights, more premium deck lists on here. Overall, to try to promote the premium format. We're still going to do Overdress and V-Era content on this channel, but for the most part, we're going to try to focus on premium. So without any ado, thanks so much for watching, guys. You guys take care. Bye. All right, guys, y'all take care. Thank you again for watching.